Home to the emperors of China for over 500 years, some may be wondering if Forbidden City exists within Flight Simulator 2020. The answer to that is yes. Located within Beijing, the palace complex is just one of many places to see in China. At a distance of nearly 1,000 miles from Forbidden City is a tourist service centre within the Yangtze National Geopark. The park itself is 124 square miles of unique environment located within the Danjia landform, a place very much unlike anything else in the world. Many famous photos of this area highlight the spectacular rainbow mountains of China, and I wanted to head out this way and to see what they look like in the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. Well, the truth is they don't look anything like the many oversaturated and processed photos that you can find all over the place, but nevertheless they do indeed look rather special. Now, the region itself is rather massive, so it's fortunate that you can get up in the air with a plane and spend a bunch of time flying over here. The variation in landscape means that it's well worth doing, and you could probably spend quite some significant time simply flying around this lone little region here. Further off into the distance you can see some very high mountains. If you do want to come this way, you'll have to be careful which airplane you bring, because if you bring something like a Cessna, then well, the altitude is not something it can reach. The mountains are too high for that poor little plane. But the rest of the area is perfectly fine. There are a few airstrips nearby which you can take off from or land near. Alternatively, you can simply set your destination in the air and spawn right nearby. Now, if you want to see something more than just the mountains, you can of course fly off into the distance. Whilst the landscape is far flatter away from the mountains, it's nonetheless still very, very interesting. In fact, the entire country is full of a vast mix of different types of landscapes, so you could certainly spend a lot of time exploring it. Now, you may be wondering what to expect from the other famous areas of this country, places like the Great Wall of China, or even the Longji rice terraces. Well, whilst they exist within Flight Simulator, after a fashion, they aren't particularly well represented, but let's have a quick look anyway. So, the Great Wall of China, to all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. We're here near the ticket office, and you can see where the wall should be is actually a thin line, which is obviously taken from satellite imagery. The guard towers, meanwhile, are simple generic houses. Bottom line, it's not really worth the visit at the moment, but maybe something that will be added in the future. Elsewhere, at the Longji rice terraces, the story is relatively similar. It seems that Flight Simulator 2020 has just about managed to pick up the vague details of the rice terraces. However, for the most part, the stepped nature of the height data is completely missing. That said, from the height of a plane, they really don't look too bad, which is ultimately the main point. Now, moving away from all the countryside and into the cities, we are here at Beijing. Of course, it is home to the Forbidden City. Before we get to that though, let's have a look at Beijing itself and get a feel for how well the city is actually modelled. Now, I'm taking off here from the Capital International Airport. This is located very close to the centre of Beijing. However, there's still some distance to go, and this really affords us the opportunity to do a flyover. Now here, Flight Simulator 2020 really does get to shine with its draw distance. Even from this distance on the horizon, you can just about make out the China Central Television Building, as well as other surrounding buildings, which should include China's World Trade Center as well. Now, in case you're wondering, Beijing looks just as good as any of the other cities in Flight Simulator 2020. Whilst this isn't a photogrammetry city, it's basically auto-generated, so two different types of technology going on there, but it nonetheless remains very well put together. A quick flyover here, yep, this is somewhat accelerated, a kind of time-lapse, but it should give you a bit of a feel for what's going on. Now, the buildings here are not entirely accurate, but it's done a pretty good job. The layout, from what I've been able to determine, is slightly different. Most accurate, I think, is the CCTV building. But if you're doing a flyover, then I think you're not going to be disappointed. So, we're coming up on Forbidden City, which lies to the east of the large buildings. That makes it very easy to find by sight without any form of GPS needed whatsoever. In case you're wondering, the graphics are currently set to Ultra at a resolution of 1080p. My previous video should help you out if you want to get a feel for the differences between Ultra settings and Low, or indeed any of the other presets. From this altitude, which, let's face it, as far as flying goes, we are relatively low, But even from this height, it's clear to see that Forbidden City is actually very detailed. Now, I'm not personally familiar with the region, however, comparing mapping data to what we have here in Flight Simulator 2020, well, there's a lot of recognisable buildings, so it's not just Forbidden City that has been well put together, but also the surrounding environment. In short, it's well worth a look. Of course, there are also many other areas to visit in China, and I'd like to do that in a future video. For now though, we are pretty much at the end of this one. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.